Hello there, and welcome to Gooner U, where there are no degrees because the learning never stops. I'm Dove, a TA here at Gooner U, and my friend Keith is our stalwart, distinguished professor of Arsenal and football studies. Enter our classroom as we discuss the week's news involving Arsenal, Premier League, Champions League, and international football, all from the perspective of a couple of Americans. This week featured Arsenal's return from the international break, and to our home in London, against Nottingham Forest. Hello, Keith.
Hello, Dove. I feel chastened.
Oh, yeah?
By MLS news, not so much by results, not so much by Arsenal. I feel very encouraged by Arsenal this week. But
yeah, what happened in MLS?
Unfortunately, my beloved New York City was unceremoniously dumped out of the postseason by Red Bulls of all teams.
Insult to injury.
Sigh. Anyway, we'll see how that goes. We'll drop in some MLS news in just a little bit later as well. But
sure.
Yes, that was the end of Saturday. Saturday morning went pretty well. So
yeah. So one thing I wanted to mention that kind of got me laughing. So we each week when we record this episode that you, dear viewer, are watching or dear listener are listening to right now, we record the whole thing. It takes us about an hour or so, and we have that recording, and then we talk about what are interesting things we covered that we might want to make a distilled version of for our shorts that we post to Instagram. Threads, actually Facebook now, that's fairly new this week, Twitter, X, and YouTube. We post the shorts to all those platforms, right? And so last week, one of them that we decided to do a short on was the history of United States goalkeepers, so Americans playing abroad and for our national team. And you had mentioned a whole bunch of names on the show and in the episode, the short, that I hadn't heard before, and I wanted to include pictures of them for the short. And I like including visuals whenever I can to accompany that stuff. And looking at it, if you look at every single one who you mentioned, starting with Tim Howard, the only one I'd heard of before, and moving on down the list, there are a whole bunch of bald white guys. It's not surprising that I, as a kid, was apparently destined to have an affinity for the goalkeeping position. Apparently, I would have fit in well had I stuck with it.
certainly for the Americans, there's a long tradition. Although Matt Turner's got a nice a nice head of hair.
He's still young.
Yeah.
Matt Turner, who, by the way, I did notice was not playing for Forest. I guess we'll talk about that a little bit later. So anyways, a little bit of follow-up as well. We've talked in past episodes about the Stat Sports halters that they wear, the little bra-looking things that most of the professional players seem to wear underneath their jerseys. And we talked before about what they're for. And I don't remember if we specifically mentioned this before, but I saw this because I think Arsenal actually sent me like a partner marketing message from them that arrived in my inbox this week. And apparently what they're really focused on is actually like the fine-grained GPS to track field position over the course of a training session, or more often in a match, probably, to see where a person's hanging out and, if there's a way to improve that. So that seems, I'm sure it does capture heart rate and other metrics, but it seems like the GPS is a big focus of it. So I just wanted to mention that to anyone who was interested from when we've talked about that before.
Well, you had the marketing stuff. I was thinking I would be very curious to see those strapped on a bunch of 7-year-olds and see what their game maps look like.
Oh God, could you spaghetti all over the field?
Actually, I was thinking it was just going to be like just clumps.
If you're looking at the whole team as a whole, yes, they move as a clump. If you look at it over the course of the entire match, there is no, it's like, you look at Saka and he's like on the right side, like, 90+% of the time. And occasionally, like when he scored his goal, like occasionally like venturing over from there and stuff like that. But yeah, there's no rhyme or reason where the kids play. But yeah, I don't even know if they make them in kid sizes. I'd be surprised if they did, but not super surprised, but a little surprised. I saw
that, Red Hook Youth Soccer. Get on that.
Yeah. I saw an interesting story pop up this week. So we've talked a few times over the last couple of years as they either added focus on and started enforcing the rule that players must exit at the nearest touch line when they are substituted off, right? And so this results in some players taking a long walk around the outside of the pitch to make it back to their stands, and give the fans in the crowd an opportunity to sometimes cheer them on as they walk past, perhaps at a home game, or perhaps not. What has happened with Wrexham recently?
Right. So they're dealing with a player, James McClean, I think it's pronounced, who is of Irish descent. He's from Derry originally, which, if you know anything about the history of Britain and Ireland, Derry was the site of the Bloody Sunday, where a number of Irish Catholics were killed by British military forces, police forces, during the long period known as the Troubles. Derry and Londonderry are right on the boundary between Ireland and Northern Ireland. And so for that reason, he is an Irish nationalist. It would be fair to say, certainly. And for that reason, he rejects wearing the poppy. You probably saw not before the international break, not so much this past week. Sort of a red splotch with a black dot in the middle. It's a poppy representation of poppy flower, which is typically worn in commemoration of what they know in Europe as Armistice Day, what we call in the U.S. Veterans Day, but Armistice Day marking the end of the First World War. He doesn't wear it because he feels the way it's treated as a celebration or commemoration of the British war dead. Who, I mean, this is also during the war is the Easter Rising in 1917, which was also faced some fairly brutal reprisals from British forces, so he doesn't wear it, and he's gotten a lot of pushback from that from fans. And it's always a fine line between what is or what is acceptable and isn't in terms of to say up players. I mean, there's a certain expectation that you'll to heap abuse on players, especially on opponents. But at the same time, there is a line somewhere, and in this case, it seems McClean is McClean. I guess, and I think you read the story more recently than I do. He doesn't have to. He gets to come off right at the bench and basically gets to go to the sheltered bench.
Correct. He gets to go straight to his bench instead of taking the long walk around the edge. They made a special dispensation for him. This was agreed on by the FA or whatever more specific body needed to decide on such things. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate thing that they feel has to happen. I on some level, I understand it's a commemorative piece, right? It's about the commemoration of the dead from the war, but on a certain political level, I get it, and it's not. I get why it's touchy for a lot of people, but I do think it's fair. The fact that they have to change the rules for him like this, that they feel compelled to change the rules like this, tells me there's a problem. That's, again, how far do we really need to take this kind of condemnation of players for their personal stances on things?
Yeah, it can certainly go overboard sometimes. No argument there. So, meanwhile, in happier news, how did the U.S. end up doing in CONCACAF?
Right, a smashing result at home. They beat Jamaica 4-2, meaning they advanced 5-2. So they had two legs for the CONCACAF Nations League. They officially advanced to the semifinals again. This is the fourth Nations League, the fourth time we made the semis. Actually, we have won the previous three, so we're the only champion the CONCACAF Nations League has ever known. The next final round will be in March. During that international break, the next big international break, the U.S. will play Panama in the semifinals, which will be at SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, California, which is Los Angeles.
Right.
Canada and Mexico will are officially the other semifinal. Mexico did advance. I was right. They did score deep into stoppage time, but of course it was the fourth goal of a game. They were already winning 3-0, so they were pretty much already through anyway. But yeah, so no real surprises there. The U.S., Canada, Panama, Mexico are very clearly the four strongest teams in CONCACAF right now. So it'll be a good test, and it was a good performance for the U.S. On home soil. Jamaica was definitely a bit overmatched, much better at home than in Kingston. So the Pochettino era continues apace, I guess. The only thing left before that in January, what they call the January camp, the American-based U.S. internationals will play friendly against Venezuela, which forgot what that was. I remember seeing this at Fort Lauderdale, Florida. So they'll play at Inter Miami's current digs. So, but that's a January thing, and it won't involve most of the full U.S. team.
Oh, okay. All right. What about Asia?
Right, World Cup qualifying. Japan beats China 3-1. Japan has clinched a spot in the top 4 spots in their group, which means they would either the top 2 automatically qualify, or the spots 3 and 4 go to the final round of qualification for Asia's final spot. So Japan is in pretty good shape to make the World Cup. They're going to make the World Cup.
I have to say I'm a little disappointed they conceded another goal.
They did, yeah. These things happen, It was an away game, so I guess I can only be so critical. But this one, actually, it was Lin Liang Ming, so it was actually a conceded goal as opposed to the own goal.
Right.
That was their other one. So this one, they actually did give up a goal scored by another player. But yeah, they'll take up back in March. They'll play Bahrain and Saudi Arabia at home in the March break, at which point I imagine they will officially wrap up their spot in the 2026 World Cup.
Yeah, all right. Heading over to CONMEBOL to discuss their World Cup qualifications, it seems Argentina did beat Peru at home. They had a 1-0 victory, which still keeps them at the top of the CONMEBOL World Cup qualification standings with 25 points. They're 5 points clear of Uruguay, who is next. So they're looking good for making it into World Cup.
Yeah, I think they're in pretty good shape there. Colombia had a pretty rough go around this international break, losing at home to Ecuador. Just not ideal if you're Colombia. It has cost them spots. They've dropped now to 4th officially in the table, which is impressive. Even they're tied with Ecuador. Ecuador was earlier in qualifying docked 3 points, so actually they're theoretically even higher up in the table. But again, top 6 qualify. Colombia is 6 points clear of Bolivia in 7th, so I think you still feel pretty good about their chances.
So meanwhile, over in Oceania, the Oceania Football Confederation, OFC, Fiji played against New Caledonia. They are at the top of their group. New Caledonia was in number 1 going into this match. Fiji was in number 2. They remain as such with a 1-1 draw. So New Caledonia has 7 points. Fiji has 5. They are 2 clear of Solomon Islands. Remind me how many move on from each group?
So it's 2. The top 2. They just played the 3 games, so the group is done. So New Caledonia and Fiji advance out of Group A after their 1-1 draw, in part because the team, I think they were worried about. No, Solomon Islands did win, so technically, I guess they were worried about Papua New Guinea. The draw clinched it for Fiji. If they had lost and Papua New Guinea had won, it might have been dicey. Actually, it would have been, because I can see on the goal difference, but they didn't. So Fiji are through along with New Caledonia, and they'll face the top 2 from Group B, which is New Zealand and Tahiti. The Tahitians beat Vanuatu 2-0. New Zealand beat Samoa 8-0. And they'll face off again in March. New Caledonia versus Tahiti in one semifinal, New Zealand, Fiji in the other. The winners will face off in a final. The winner there will qualify for the World Cup. Those games will all be played in Wellington, New Zealand. So,
all right. Luck. Yeah. So catch me up on the rest of MLS. Who is into the conference finals?
Right. So Red Bulls, we mentioned before, beat New York City. They're going to play Orlando. Orlando City knocked off Atlanta. So it'll be Orlando versus New York Red Bulls. In the East, in the West, Seattle upset LAFC in extra time. So it'll be the Seattle Sounders. They're going to go play the LA Galaxy, who thumped Minnesota earlier today. So the MLS Final Four, Orlando versus New York Red Bulls, and LA Galaxy versus Seattle. And those will be next Saturday. Yeah, Saturday the 30th, the end of
All right. That'll be fun. And That takes us to Nottingham Forest.
Right. So, yeah, this was fun, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was good to see a victory again. It's been a little while.
It does feel. I mean, the international break sort of adds that, right? There's the whole other week where
Yeah.
we didn't even play a game, but of course we won. I think the first thing just to talk about is some of the lineup, some of the interesting things we
Yeah.
saw the lineup there. I mean, we see Jesus starting up top, so no Kai Havertz. We see Jorginho in the middle of the park, no Partey
Mm-hmm.
or Declan Rice. Both of them started on the bench, however. We did see Odegaard, though, looking good. And then Calafiori was back. He's
Right.
playing on the left side with Timber on the right. Last I'd seen was Ben White. I think I saw somewhere they said months, perhaps, in recovering from surgery. So,
That's
um,
unfortunate. Yeah.
yeah. So it was a bit of a rotated lineup, but I mean, how many times have we talked about that idea that we want to be able to see different players, and not because injuries force you to make those changes, but because you're trying to make those changes. But whatever the reason he made them, we look good.
Yeah. Yeah. It was overall it was a good showing. Things got a little sloppier toward the mid to late match, like kind of some of the second half. Clearly, they widened their goal difference. Like their overall performance was great, but I noticed like some careless giveaways and things like maybe just shaking off the rust a little bit from the week off. Especially Odegaard didn't play internationally. Like who did play from Arsenal with their national teams?
I mean, yeah. So that was a lot of the big talk, right, about how many guys just didn't go out with their countries. We know Saka and Declan Rice stayed home. Rice was on the bench for this game, did not get in. I suspect, we know he's dealing obviously with a broken toe, so we'll see how that plays out long term. Martinelli, I believe. I don't remember if Martinelli went off with Brazil. Actually, I know, Gabriel did. And played a bunch with Brazil. Saliba played some with France. But we think about some of the guys we have and how they're still so many of them are kind of recovering from injuries. I know a lot more stayed home than usual. But Kai
Right.
Havertz played a bunch for Germany, and he didn't get in this game at all. And it's nice when when you can say a player like Havertz doesn't play and you don't feel like you missed him at all, in a
Right.
good way. That we
Right.
were able to rotate and do that, especially because we'll talk more about the long-term stretch in a moment, but we finished the last international break. We're rolling 2 games a week now for really until the end of the calendar year, is basically really until the end of the year. So, um, yeah, this is the kind of thing we need to be able to do, to rotate guys in and get certain players. We saw Zinchenko play, we saw Wanyeri play, Hardy came off the bench, Raheem Sterling got time in. So this is the kind of thing we all want to see, right? Being able to put different guys in so that it isn't the same people going 90, 90, 90, 90 all the time.
Right. Now, when Party came on, that was a halftime substitution.
Mm-hmm.
What was going on there? Was it just because Jorginho had the yellow card? And I know close to halftime, he'd also had a foul that looked like it could have potentially been ruled a second yellow also. Did Arteta just want him out of there, or was it a strategy change?
I don't know. I haven't heard anything in particular about that one necessarily. I didn't see anyone. I mean, I obviously saw people like, oh, that's an interesting one. My
Yeah.
suspicion is it's the yellow. It was the concern about the yellow. I mean, we're not going to talk about the refereeing. There were some inconsistencies. It was fascinating how we had so much possession and somehow we're also the one getting all the yellow cards. Don't really know how that happens, but I mean, I understand, and I think there's a one of the things we sort of talked about with the previous in some of our previous situations, right? Like, okay, maybe the yellows received by Rice and Trossard weren't necessarily fair, but also like you're already walking with a yellow, so you're putting yourself in a position where a bad decision can really cost you. And yeah,
Hmm.
Jorginho, I thought Jorginho was okay today or yesterday. I didn't think he was. I don't think he was bad. I don't think anybody was bad really yesterday. But Jorginho, yeah, he's a guy. If he gets beat, he's not afraid to foul. And the way the game was being called, I can't sit here and say, he was going to let that go. Are we
Right.
sure? So yeah, it could have been an element of precaution. You know, I didn't hear anything about an injury, so I hope, and certainly hope that I don't want to put that out into the universe necessarily.
Yeah, no, that's what I took away from it. Is it was, well, he was cautioned, and things were not looking like he'd definitely be good for the rest of the match. So yeah, just abundance of caution after being cautioned. I guess I guess that's what it's for.
That's what the yellow means. Yellow means caution.
Yep. So yeah, I mean, we started knocking on their door right off the bat. I mean, like the first corner kick of the match was in the second minute. I mean, that was not necessarily from a direct attack. Just, Marino's kind of played the ball out off of someone's leg, and then we had Timber got his goal, his ill-fated goal. Like it was in the 5th minute. Like they were pounding away right from the beginning.
Yeah, and so I guess I'm impressed, of course, by them taking that, going forward with it and being aggressive from the off a lot, like we saw sort of in the peak of that great run we had, in the second half of last season, where it was just this relentless pressure over and over again on the opposition. And I have to say, I mean, when I watched it, it wasn't surprised at the call. Like that seemed a pretty straightforward offside with Marino getting the header on it. He froze again. Oh, are you still there? Okay, sorry. Technical.
Yeah, I came back. Oh no! Oh no! We can recover.
Yeah, we'll recover. Yeah. So, but that's just it, right? When things, you worry at those points when they don't score in those early opportunities, because we've seen in the past how they can, they're in their own heads. They don't score early on and think you start to pull back and are on the edge of the box. They didn't do that. They went after it. They were very aggressive, very much on the front foot. And so, I mean, as frustrating as it is to see the goal called back, it was offside. That wasn't I see it. That wasn't a difficult decision. And then we kept at it, and it was about 10 minutes later that finally, and admittedly, there was a little bit of, I guess I'd say, imperiousness from Saka. It wasn't necessarily, there were some cheeky bits of play, just that pass Odegaard makes, just that very short, hit the ball, maybe a yard in front of him. I just, to weight the ball that perfectly right where Saka needed it. And then Saka just kind of shrugs off the defender and turns. I mean, the turn he makes at the top of the box, because how many times have we seen guys try to make that kind of run across the box and they can't quite turn the body the whole way, and the ball just kind of sails off and, wide of the post, not even close.
Right.
He turns and he rifles it in, and it's just, it's something.
Yeah, I saw a lot of really good ball movement from Odegaard in that vein. Just like the little flicks that just like barely even touches it, but just enough to get it to the person who needs to go to. Just it's good to have him back.
Yeah, he just when he's confident, when he's feeling it, he can do so many things. There's no one else on the team can do some of the things he does. And like we've talked a little bit about, right, the important players, best players. We've talked about Odegaard, Saka, Saliba. I mean, we've played a game without Saliba. We kind of survived. We've played a game without Saka. It wasn't great, but we can do it. We played games without Odegaard. I think if there's an indispensable man, I think it's him. Based on what we've seen this season.
Yeah.
But yeah, on some level, this is also Saka's goal. Kind of, powers across, shrugs off the defender. Again, there's a bit of brute force to that kind of goal. We can marvel at the skill, but that was a little bit of all right, we're not going to make 100 passes and walk it into the net. Give me the ball. I'm going to score. And sometimes you need that kind of, just take the game by the scruff of the neck and say, no, this is mine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think if I had to fault Saka for something I noticed during the match, it was maybe an overzealous attempt at scoring. There were a bunch of times where it looked like he was trying to score, and there was just no way. He was just so boxed in, like it wasn't going to make it through. But I guess maybe there's something to that, though, like just letting them know that we're not going to stop trying. Maybe there is something I'm not appreciating in why he would be doing that. But
well, one, he was very good. I mean, he was beating his defenders all day.
Yeah, he was. Yeah,
he was doing that thing where you watch him and you're just waiting, like, what's he gonna do to beat this guy one-on-one? But also, like, you want that kind of selfishness. We've talked about this with Trossard and a few others. You want that kind of selfishness in goal scorers. You want them to believe in themselves, say, no, I can score. And you want them to have that confidence. And yeah, sometimes it leads to a lot of bad shots, but they take them because I want to score. I am here to score goals. This is what I'm going to do. And, that's going to mean they take some shots that look silly to us, but, it's the Wayne Gretzky line, right? 100, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yep. So it was midway through the first half. We got our first couple of yellow cards to Jorginho and Jesus.
Jorginho's. I feel like Jorginho's was a little more on the line of a bit of a desperate foul. He got beat by the man and just kind of pulls him back. Is that it's a soft yellow. He doesn't pull him back. There's a slight bit of contact. It feels soft, but I can sort of in my mind justify it. The Jesus one was tough because the guy comes in behind him, and
right.
As much as I said everyone had a good day, I thought Jesus had a bit of an unlucky day. He's so close. He's really just so close. It feels like, if he can get something to go right. But yeah, he does feel like he's in kind of that funk where nothing seems to go right for him.
Well, I wouldn't say nothing. He did. He made the assist to Nwaneri at the end, right?
Yeah, we'll talk about the Nwaneri goal, but
there was something. But yeah, I agree. His direct attempts didn't do much this match. Yeah. But yeah, so then we had a nice shot from Trossard at long range. I was blocked by the keeper. I don't know if they closed out the match this way, but I'd seen certainly like toward the middle to late match, they had 0 shots on goal. And I think if it ended with a positive number, it was no more than like 1 or 2.
This is ESPN's said no shots on goal for Forest, 7 shot attempts to Arsenal's 19. So
right,
yeah, no, I mean this was like it was. We talk about the comparison point to earlier to last season, earlier in the calendar year, right? It was that relentlessness of the pressure of the game, like the opposition doesn't even have a chance to get back into the game. And that's kind of what we saw here. Like, how many times in the last couple of weeks, especially, but how many times this season we've talked about sort of waiting for that, like 10 to 15 minute stretch where the opposition gets on the front foot, pushes the ball forward, generates some opportunities, and and there were points we were talking like in the pub watching, like we're sort of waiting for that to happen, and at a certain point you kind of realize it's just not going to. And look, Forest is a tough one because we talked at the beginning of the season. I pegged them as a team to go down. They're clearly better than that. Forest currently sits 7th in the table at 19 points, which is pretty good. They have a win against Liverpool on their ledger this season. Like, they've had a really good start to the season. But I do think they are. I do think, I don't look at Forest and say to myself, oh, that's a team that's going to be challenging for a Champions League spot come April. I don't think they're that. I think they've done well to get the results they've gotten so far this season. But I do think there is a, playing at Arsenal was and Forest did not play particularly well. I think you can say they're fair to say they had a bad day, but I think we were definitely better overall, and I think we're a stronger team, and I think we showed it.
Well, yeah. This is, when we talked in the preview a couple of weeks ago or last week for this match. I mean, yeah, it was. This is a match that we should have won. Like, this wasn't a surprise. It was good, and we're glad for it. But playing at home against Forest, it's not one that you expect, that you go in expecting to lose or expecting there's a good chance you will lose. But yeah. So then we got to halftime. We had Partey come on for Jorginho. We discussed that a little bit. That was a little surprising, but it worked out pretty well in short order in that second half when Partey ended up taking one of those shots that he takes so often from outside the 18-yard box, but it went under the crossbar. It hit the net.
That was fun. I guess I think the answer at this point is he doesn't get to shoot anymore. He scored his one. He gets one of those a season, it seems like. So that's your one. That's it. Don't shoot anymore. But it was a heck of a goal.
Yeah, it was funny because I was just reminding my dad, who I was watching the match with, that he takes those and they usually go really high. So it's actually good that he showed the restraint and kept it down. And then later on the match, he took another one, and I told my dad, like, yeah, that's what usually happens.
I told you, he gets one.
Right.
He gets one. But you know what? He made it count. I mean, right. I mean, we talked about the domination, but there's the nerves that come from, well, you're dominating the game, and yet it's only 1-0. And yeah, as it turns out, in retrospect, you can say, wow, Forest was never really in a position to score a goal. But that second goal kind of really takes the air out of the game in a lot of ways. And it wasn't long after that we saw the subs really started to come on then, including Zinchenko.
Yeah. I'm still getting used to his new jersey number. It's I'm having a little trouble finding him on the field sometimes.
Yeah, I think with this one, well, I think the real reason is I think Calafiori is still probably recovering a little bit from injury, so you probably don't want him to go the full length of the game. But we were kind of joking that Zinchenko has a lot of skills, especially offensively. But it's fair to say his defense is a weakness, which is not great when you're nominally a defender.
Right.
So we kind of joked that this was Zinchenko coming on was the equivalent of Arteta saying, "This game's over, and I know we won." Like, I'm not worried about we use the phrase "the victory cigar." Just sort of light it up, say, "Yeah, we're gonna win."
I see what you're saying. I think maybe a little bit more precisely, maybe it's that we weren't really worried about their offensive efforts, where we didn't need to guard heavily against their offense, where he plays more towards the midfield and is kind of more of a ball mover than a defender. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do think there is an argument as well to be made. One of Zinchenko's strengths, of course, is his possession, passing, his offensive abilities, and having him on the pitch there in a game where we're already dominating possession does allow us to continue to do that. And so the idea is, it is a version of the best offense. The best defense is a good offense, right? How do you prevent them from scoring? Well, they just don't have the ball. We're going to keep scoring. We're going to keep pushing the ball forward, and then they can't. What are they going to do with that? As we saw, nothing. There's nothing they can do.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the first of the second half subs, after halftime. Then it was maybe 15 minutes or so after that, we had Nwaneri came on for Saka and Sterling on for Odegaard in a double sub, and that clearly had a direct impact. Not really from Sterling. I didn't really see him do much the rest of the match.
Well, it was. I know we said before it was Jesus. It was actually Sterling who had the assist on one.
Oh, was it?
Goal. It was a give.
I misidentified that.
Between the two of them. Yeah, Sterling.
I take that back. Okay.
Sterling is an interesting one because, and part of it is just hard to think about, because it feels like he's been in the league forever, because he kind of has been. The lifespan of a professional athlete. It's. Yeah, it feels like part of me. I've sort of mentioned him kind of as like a Havertz acquisition, like a guy who's kind of his race is run in other places, but he has something left to give, and Arteta has some vision of what Sterling can do for Arsenal. But part of me also worries that, as a lot of other people have pointed out, Sterling was acquired right at the very end of the transfer window. And you don't acquire those guys because you have a plan for them. You acquire them because you wanted something, and then whatever else you were looking for fell through. So it does. There is a sense. I mean, he was on a very low because he's actually on loan from Chelsea, so it's a very low payment as far as we're concerned. So there's a part of me that feels like Sterling is a little surplus to requirements, but he's there because we need the body. But if he's going to play, you want him, or if he's there, you want him to play, and you want him to be participating and be involved. And it was a nice little give and go with Nwaneri, who congratulations on your first Premier League goal at 17.
Yeah. It's pretty incredible.
Think about it. If I had scored my first goal in the Premier League at 17, I'd have lost my mind, right? That'd been awesome. And the first thing he does is he goes and points towards Sterling for the pass. And otherwise, as far as celebrations go, is actually fairly muted.
Yeah.
Which, it's not his first goal of the season. We saw had a couple in the League Cup, but to come on and score in a Premier League game is is pretty great. And so, yeah, congrats to him for that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and especially considering the specific teams that we've drawn in the League Cup too, like it is a meaningful difference in the level of play. So yeah, no, it's good for him, and yeah, we that was the final nail in the coffin.
Yeah, that one kind of finished up. But to your point there about the quality of the opposition, I mean, there was a lot of talk in the last couple of weeks about getting Wanyeri into games with Odegaard out because he is that kind of progressive midfielder who could theoretically do that. But I mean, you look at some of the games that Odegaard's missing. I mean, we're talking about even just the the recent weeks before the last break, Liverpool, Newcastle, Inter, Chelsea. Like that's a lot to ask of a 17-year-old kid as opposed to coming on for the last 15 minutes or so of a game against Forest that you kind of already won.
Mm-hmm.
And you think about the Newcastle game. I mean, like, and there was a comment that was made. Arsblog pointed this out from his post game. This was Arteta's response, was asking about Wanyeri. This is what he said. I'm just going to read from the article and quote it here. I am responsible to build a career for him. You have to do that brick by brick. Today he put another brick. Now we have to put another cement. Make sure it doesn't get dry so we can put another one, and that will stick. Then we put one more layer. If you want to put 5 in a row, believe me, it won't work. We have to manage not only his expectation, but his load as well, which is really important.
Yeah.
And I think and he suggests this, and I've kind of thought this too. I think there's a physical aspect to it. Again, being 17, like, your opposition are guys like in their mid to late 20s. And that, like, if you're thinking you're 17, the other guy's 27, that's an age where those 10 years is huge.
Oh, yeah.
For your physical development. It's a much bigger gap between 17 and 27 than it is between 27 and 37. Well, 37 is kind of going the wrong way. But like,
in the other direction, yeah.
Or 24 to 34, right? You're talking guys who are still theoretically in their physical prime. Like, especially like Newcastle. Newcastle would have killed him. I mean, that's a physical team, and that's a lot to ask of a teenager.
And then Arteta, the mental side of it too, I think, right? You want to put him in positions where he's going to do well to continue building his confidence. You don't want him to get shaken by going against Manchester City or something like that and getting creamed physically and potentially also just like not doing well, like scoring a goal in this Premier League match. That's something that's going to buoy him throughout the season. I think it's smart that Arteta's looking at it that way.
Yeah, it'll be curious to see how he continues that development in terms of integrating him into the squad. I mean, obviously, as we said, we got 2 games a week coming up for the next month plus. That's going to include 2 Champions League games as well as the League Cup quarterfinal, which I realize we're playing Palace, but I expect that to be a more rotated side because it's the League Cup. So, but yeah, we've got the Champions League. I mean, we'll talk about this sort of as we get to our look ahead. If you look at our schedule between now and the end of the year, it is substantially lighter than what we've seen. Like, there is something to be said. It'll all work out in the end. Everybody plays everyone home and away. But our schedule has been very difficult. Think about how many, not only top opponents we've played, Villa, Spurs, City, Liverpool, Newcastle, Chelsea, and how many of them have we played away from home, right?
Right.
Villa, Spurs, City, Newcastle, Chelsea, like, that's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been, especially with some of the injuries we've dealt with. So thinking ahead like that, I wonder if that gives some opportunities, again, with games coming every 2 weeks, to rotate players in. Our Champions League, I mean, our Champions League opponents, we play PSG at Inter and then at Atalanta. I mean, those are arguably the 3 toughest games we're going to see in the Champions League, and they're already done. So, there was room for that kind of rotation. And I think, as I said, if it just continues to be brick by brick, because again, Arteta also has to think about this. He is not a youth manager. His job is not to develop the kids. His job is to win games.
Right.
And Wanyeri, if he's going to be called in, it has to be in a position to help us win games. And clearly there's something Arteta sees that he's not ready to make that leap yet, which, again, he sees things that we don't, in training and sort of behind the scenes. So it was good to see him play. Like you said, this was a game where he was set up for success. He had success. Yeah.
Yeah. No, good showing, and a great contribution. So So who would you consider to be your player of the match?
I can name a lot of people here. I was
Yeah.
generally impressed all day. I mean, obviously we could point to like Sacco for a great play on the goal. I was very impressed with Urian Timber, whose game I enjoyed a great deal. But I have to say Odegaard. Like, you can just see how much he does for the team, and we talked about this in the Chelsea game, how much better he made them. But I think this game was sort of his welcome back, and in some ways even more than some of that Chelsea one. Like, this was a game we dominated in large part because of all the things Odegaard does.
Yeah, definitely. I second that. He was on my short list. I think ultimately, I would pick Saka. I think with what you were talking about, I noticed that too, with him slipping the defenders so effortlessly, so much of the time. That was great to watch.
Cook him.
Yeah, that was really fun. So great on the ball. Yeah.
I do quickly when Wanyeri did something similar in the build up to his goal to juke a defender out of position as well. Again, those kinds of things are a confidence play. Those are the things you do when you're feeling really good about yourself. And Saka does it. I mean, Saka's kind of beyond the point of really worrying about his confidence. Like, he knows he's good, and sometimes it just doesn't work. You know, that's the problem he'll run into is not every move you try works. I think with Ranieri, there's a little bit of that confidence too to try that against a Premier League defender.
And I once you mentioned it, I remembered that play because I actually watched the match earlier today as we record. I watched the full match replay, time shifted by a little more than 24 hours. So it's a little fresh in my mind. Yeah, I know exactly which one you were talking about. Great all around. I mean, Nwaneri definitely deserves a mention as, like a runner up for me for player of the match, just making a meaningful contribution in the short time that he was on the field. So,
yeah, I think that's fair. Although I would hesitate I don't think you can give a man of the match performance for a guy who plays 15 minutes in a game that we won and we're so dominant, right?
And we're already ahead when he joined. Yeah.
Like I picked him a couple weeks ago, right? But that was in a week where we were kind of garbage. That was the Newcastle one, right? He was good against Palace, and then he got to play in a game, and that was good because otherwise we were not good. So yeah.
Honorable mention, yes.
Honorable mention is fair.
So one question I wanted to ask you about. So I noticed we've been talking about stars on the jerseys for the different teams. This came up with Inter Milan most recently. We've talked about with Argentina, with Inter Milan. I was surprised that there were so few stars, but you pointed out gold stars mean, what was it, 10 victories or something?
10 titles.
Yeah. So I see the 2 stars on Forest's crest, and we've talked before how we don't see a lot of stars on Premier League sides. What are their stars for?
So those are for the 2 times that Nottingham Forest won the European Cup, what is now the Champions League. So
okay.
They are 2-time European champions, which was the work of Brian Clough, who was the longtime manager at Forest. Before that, had been a longtime manager at Derby. Certainly the greatest English manager never to manage England. Arguably one of the greatest managers, certainly in the league's history. To take Derby to the semifinals of the Champions League, or what has become the Champions League, and then a few years later to come back and then to win the thing twice with Nottingham Forest. Forest has had a couple of good teams here and again, but Liverpool is one of the great old clubs of England. We've talked about Arsenal, Manchester United, like the clubs that are, have tons of titles, consistent success. Not Nottingham Forest, and there they are. He won 2 European titles. So,
and I can see why they'd be proud enough of that to put it on their shirts. Yeah. So looking at the table now, it's kind of interesting. We were talking about it a little bit before we recorded. So on points alone, we're in a 3-way tie for 3rd place right now at 22 points, with Chelsea ahead of us on goal difference and Brighton behind us on goal difference. And we're actually, it's not even goal difference.
No, it's goals scored.
Right. We're even on goal difference with Chelsea. Yeah, exactly. We're ahead of Brighton on goal difference, but even with Chelsea on goal difference. So it's the next tiebreaker. Yeah. But so then Manchester City only 1 point ahead of us on the table. They've had a run of bad results is the factual way to state it without any editorializing.
They've lost 5 consecutive matches, which is like stunning. They've lost 5 consecutive matches. I mean, two of them were to Spurs, which is funny. Well, it's funny in the abstract, but also like Tottenham is like kind of their bugbear. Like Tottenham's is like the club that has just they struggle with. They lost in the League Cup. They lost at home. And the league, that's 4-0 at home. That's insane. But they, lost to Brighton, lost to Sporting in the Champions League, which, by the way, look who's next on the schedule for us. Lost away to Bournemouth. Like, it's a shocking run of form for them. And we've always sort of had in our minds like that. Manchester City, they'll just kick on. They'll just win. We'll win 12 games in a row at some point. I mean, maybe they will. But nobody would have seen them losing 5 in a row either. So
no.
But at the moment, we're all still staring up at Liverpool, who won again today, being Sunday. 10 wins of 12 with a draw and a loss. So they're off to a pretty good start to the season at 31 points. So yeah, we're 9 back of them. It's too early to I think to worry about it too much. But in sort of looking ahead, I don't know. I guess is this the time to sort of just talk about our schedule coming up through the end of December?
Yeah, may as well. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So here's our games coming up through the end of December, which includes. So we have this week at Sporting in the Champions League at West Ham. Next week, home to United midweek at Fulham. The next week, Monaco in the Champions League and Everton in the Premier League, both at home. Then 2 straight games, Palace at home in the League Cup quarterfinals, and then away to Palace in the league. And then our game is on December 27th. We're against Ipswich at home. And then I wasn't looking at the right schedule here. Mine cuts off in December. I believe New Year's Day, we will play Bournemouth. I want to say it's Bournemouth. Hang on. Pull them up.
Yeah.
My calendar I was looking at just ran through December. No, at Brentford.
Yeah, me too. I do the same thing.
At Brentford. I was about to say, at Brentford, at Brighton on the 4th. And then we have a week off finally until the FA Cup. And then after that, in the midweek against Spurs, which is our next true. I mean, Brighton maybe. But like that's a run there. I mean, the toughest opponents, certainly in the league, the toughest opponent is going to be United, but that game's at home. At Fulham is not easy. Monaco and Sporting, we know are both troublesome as far as Champions League opponents, but I look at that and I say to myself, there is no reason we can't win. We shouldn't win any of those games.
Right.
As opposed to some of the games we've already played. And, you can talk about, like at City, a draw is pretty good for that result, for that fixture. I mean, yeah, we've struggled against some of these opponents. Sporting's good, Fulham's good. At Palace isn't fun. Playing Everton is never fun. But yeah, this is a game we should be. This is a stretch coming up where we need to be able to start really racking up points. And Liverpool, we talked difficulty of schedules. Liverpool's hasn't quite seen some of those opponents yet. So as they start playing those again, it doesn't take a lot to drop a couple points, squeeze things together. Look, we're not losing. I mean, as long as we can sort of get the results we're going to have that we want, we're not going to lose the title in January. By January, like it's going to be February, March, especially as theoretically at least our fixtures get a little more congested as we go deeper. Hopefully, continue. I mean, we'll advance in the Champions League, but hopefully start to continue going deeper in the Carabao Cup, deep in the FA Cup. So. Yeah, this is a real opportunity for us to really rack up some points, and we need to do
it. Yeah, it's also easy to see from Liverpool's perspective. They've been the beneficiary of a bad run of form for Arsenal and Manchester City, right? Like those were 2 teams that would likely be ahead of them had each of our seasons gone better to date. So if things right themselves, yeah.
I mean, I can't really say that. They're 10-1-1. So like they would probably be leading the table regardless of how good City and Arsenal were, but
it would be close. Like right now, it's not really a race. Like if the season were over, like today, like it's not even close, right? Like we'd be giving them a run for their money, those two teams, and who knows how that pressure might have affected their last few matches. You never know. Like we will never know. It's impossible to know. But yeah,
it's possible. I think it's too early to worry about that kind of pressure. I mean, in terms of names and credit, I think to Chelsea as well, who has the same record we do, said same goal difference. They've been pretty solid. Brighton's not bad. The Premier League is deep. That's always the biggest argument in its favor in terms of the best leagues in Europe or the best league in the world is its depth. I mean, I'm looking down in the top 10. 10th is Fulham. Fulham gave us all kinds of problems last year. So you look at that top 10, Liverpool, City, Chelsea, Arsenal, Brighton, Spurs, Forest, Villa, Newcastle, Fulham. And even then, we're talking about Brentford, who's been a problem. United, who's probably better than 12th, but I don't know how much with a new manager. Bournemouth. Then you're down to West Ham in 14th. Like, there's some depth there.
Yeah.
But then again, you hit like Leicester at 16th, just fire their manager, so...
Yeah. All right, so we already basically talked about the matches for next week. Where can our viewers and listeners find those?
Right, so Tuesday, just to settle it and be sure, Tuesday, Champions League at Sporting Club of Portugal in Lisbon. That'll be on Paramount Plus. And then Saturday, back in the Premier League at West Ham at the old Olympic Stadium. That will be, and that, because it's the late game on Saturday, will be on NBC.
All right. And remind me, is Sporting the Portuguese team that we played last year in the championship or the year before in the Europa League?
I want to say Europa League. Wait, let me check that real quick.
One is Porto, the other is Sporting, and I can't remember which is which.
Yes, it was Porto last season, so Sporting was in the Sporting was the team that knocked us out of the Europa League.
Right, that's what I thought. So that's interesting. So now we play against them again in the Champions League. Interesting.
Certainly a game we need, as we say, we talked about, this is a stretch of easier games. We know full well that at Sporting is not an easy game.
Right.
So,
but at least we're not in a single elimination phase of a competition. So, we can recover from it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
I was going to say something else, but I lost it. So I think we're done here.
Thanks for joining us at Gooner U. If you're watching on YouTube, you can also listen to our show on Apple, Spotify, and some other places. If you're only listening, try watching us on YouTube with the link in the show notes. Your homework for today is to watch one of our shorts from the last few weeks, or even one from this week that you haven't seen before. We'd really appreciate it. We record the show using Zencaster. If you'd like to try it out, you can support Gooner U by signing up using the link in the description, which also has links to everything we talked about and our social pages. Again, my name is Dove, and you can find me on Twitter at Dove Frankel. With me, as always, is Keith, and you can find him in a pub watching Arsenal matches.
Happy Thanksgiving, even to you, Canada.